Hi, I'm Mike Ginter, Senior Vice President of AOPA's Air Safety Institute. Thank you for joining us today on YouTube as we explore the 35th Annual Richard G. McSpadden Report. ASI introduces this report every November, and it is exceptionally rich in the aviation safety data that it provides, and more importantly, the trend analysis that's conducted to help us create content to inform pilots to help the GA community stay safe. The Richard G. McSpadden Report focuses on general aviation accidents, including helicopters, all under 12,500 pounds. It does not include gliders and weight shift control and a few other specialty areas. Joining me today is Rob Geske, AOPA Air Safety Institute Senior Manager of Aviation Safety Analysis. And Rob's going to talk to us about some of the interesting things that came out of the report this year. So Rob, welcome. Tell us what we know about the 2023 Richard G. McSpadden Report.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The big kind of trend, the good news story is accidents are down, accident rates are down globally. There are still some areas of interest that we'd like to look into where we have seen some small rises or some small increases. Again, I expect the trend to always kind of vary a little bit, but the big news is, flight hours are up and accidents are down.
That's great news. I know, Rob, we look at some of the more real-time data. We've seen a very successful 2025. We know 2024 is going to be pretty good once the final numbers are in. But we're discussing the 2023 data in the McSpadden Report. Why is it that we're looking at 2023 and here we are 2 years later?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. You think, it's 2025, I should be seeing 2025 data. Well, 2025 hasn't completed, so we wouldn't have a full set of data. In 2024, because as you mentioned, the NTSB takes that 2 years, kind of 16, 18 months, 24 months. We don't have enough complete accidents to do a detailed analysis. So that really leaves us with 2023 as the best year to do the analysis.
You mentioned an increase in flight hours in 2023. Where do we get that data, and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the data comes from the FAA. It's the FAA General Aviation Part 135 Activity Survey. It's done every year. It's given out to aircraft owners. And as you mentioned, there was a large increase. So about 1.6 million flight hours were added this year. Just for reference, we typically only see, maybe 300 to 600,000.
So we saw 1.6 million flight hours more than 2022. And the total, I think you said, Rob, was 28.4 million flight hours in general aviation. Is that right?
Correct. 28.4 million in 2023. And then just for reference, 26.8 million was 2022. So again, a pretty sharp spike.
Good. So hours are up. The accident rates are down, fatal and overall. I know we'll dive into some of the details, but just to set the scene, Rob, who would you say is the target audience for the Richard G. McSpadden Report? I mean, I've been through the website several times. I've clicked through all the buttons. It's fascinating to see what the numbers show, but who do we think this is optimized for?
Yeah, and when you think safety report, you think, it must be analysts, it must be safety people, those who sit on committees, those who do training and education. The reality is, anyone who's a pilot should find great value in this. It helps show them where the risk areas are, what mitigations they should engage in, how they should maybe adopt a new training philosophy or policy based on what the trends are showing us. This also goes out to our policymakers. The FAA is certainly one, but we have the state level governments. We have, the U.S. Congress. All those who are dictating policy and regulation and laws can use this and see what it's telling us. It also helps members of the general public.
All too often we see the horrific scenes of an airplane crashing on the local TV, the news channels. So we invite you to take a look at the Richard G. McSpadden Report because it's the source data, it's the truth on what's really going on with general aviation safety. So Rob, there's a lot of angles that when you look at this data, mountain of data, and I know you gave us the overall accident rate and fatal accident rate a minute ago, or the numbers, but we look at it through several lenses. I know one of them is non-commercial fixed wing. What are we seeing in the non-commercial fixed wing area? And tell us a little bit about what's not included in non-commercial fixed wing.
Yeah, so non-commercial fixed wing is kind of what we think of as the larger kind of grouping. It's where most of our flight hours are. It's where a typical GA pilot would exist for the most part. Those who aren't being paid for their services, who aren't working in a commercial type operation, i.e. 135, 137, and 133. Again, we kind of look at this as largely moving downward at a very slow kind of glacial pace, and it does bounce. And I want to convey to people, we talk about a global trend of it moving downward, but the reality is that trend is kind of bouncing up and down as we look at it over time, as opposed to a constant, like, nice straight, put a ruler on it and draw a line. That is a downward trend.
So Rob, we look at a mountain of data when you create this report, and it's always impressive. But we're looking at non-commercial fixed wing, and I know we analyze that data through the lens of phases of flight. For example, landing phase, or maybe the takeoff and climb phase. I always find it interesting to see those numbers because it's a little bit counterintuitive. Can you walk us through some of the numbers on the non-commercial fixed wing phases of flight?
Yeah, I think pilots globally, if you ask them, they say, well, what's the most dangerous phase of flight? And everyone in the room, oh, it's landing. Landing is the most dangerous phase of flight. And from an accident standpoint, yes, there are, that's the largest grouping of where we see total accidents. However, from a fatal accident standpoint, it's incredibly low. And that has to do with you're low to the ground, you're moving slower. So the impact forces are just much lower. So there's a higher rate of survivability in these landing accidents. What's most likely to end in a fatal accident? There's some other ones. And that's, where we kind of get into takeoff and climb, one that pilots don't think of necessarily as being that deadly. And the reality is it's slow, high, very slow moving, high angle of attack. And if anything goes wrong, you're just high enough above the ground that you do have substantial impact forces starting to add up. You start to run into issues of when you're low to the ground and you stall, you don't have enough time to build up that speed, but as you're climbing away from the ground, your impact, velocity can increase. That potential energy, if you will, is increasing as you're going up and up. And that's where we see the most, or the category with the largest amount of fatal accidents.
Interesting. So in the landing phase, there were 329, I believe, in 2023 total
Yes.
accidents. And was it just 2 fatals in 2023 in the landing phase?
Yes.
So that kind of highlights what you're talking about, Rob, is a larger number of total accidents, but extremely few fatal in the landing phase. And then it really stood out to me in the takeoff and climb phase of flight. I saw 223 total accidents and 50 fatal. So it's about a quarter of the accidents that happened in takeoff and climb were fatal. So we focus a lot in Air Safety Institute on creating content to help pilots. That's our entire mission. Drive down the accident rate by influencing pilot behaviors through really thoughtful, engaging educational content. And that content's inspired by the data that Rob has analyzed here and puts out in the McSpadden Report. Rob, can we dive into some of the areas that aren't non-commercial fixed wing, for example, or commercial fixed wing, but you looked at the data through other causes, like some of the issues that pilots will have if they're aircraft owners or maintenance related, or maybe fuel and weather. There's really interesting stuff in there. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, so we do have, kind of the standard phases, and then we pull out some unique ones. So mechanical, kind of the things that a pilot doesn't necessarily have direct control over, but we pull out some unique ones. So we'll look at mechanical, just because the one that came as a unique shock is this one was an increase in the number of accidents from year to year, and an increase in the number of fails, quite a spike. So we went from 21 to 33, and the big driving force here is we're probably getting better at or the NTSB is getting better at being able to determine mechanical accidents. I know we'd like to, as pilots, we always like, it must be mechanical because the pilot couldn't have made a mistake. The reality is usually, unfortunately, it is the pilot, and as pilots, we kind of have to recognize that.
So Rob, in the mechanical failures, you said we had 33 fatals, and I think we had 187 total accidents. And those numbers were up just a little bit. Talk a little bit more about why we saw why the data showed a little bit of a spike there. Obviously, the quantity of accidents went slightly up in both.
The big 2 drivers in mechanical accidents are engine issues. The largest one is a total loss of power, right? The engine itself generates no power. But interestingly enough, the one that has a higher lethality is partial engine failure. So there's fewer accidents, slightly more fatal accidents in that category, but the percentage is higher. So it shows that pilots probably do a better job with a complete engine failure and saying, okay, the engine has failed, now what? As opposed to, well, I have partial power, so maybe I can, ease it back or take it, gently or level out. And we're seeing that, well, they seem to struggle with that. If you have a little bit of hope, I think, pilots stretch as opposed to saying this should be treated as a complete engine failure. I should land in a field. Yes, I have some power, but that can just aid me, as opposed to, well, let me see if I can make it back to the airport or to
We
a
see
better
that all the time, don't we, Rob? It's the ruse of more options with partial power, and in most cases, it's probably just a better plan to pretend you have no power and fly the airplane to the intended point of landing as best you can, right?
Yes.
Did you see anything in the McSpadden Report data for 2023 that you found as a troubling trend?
Yeah, the one that I always kind of put back to pilots is the fuel management. We're not doing the best there. That has been going up steadily for the past 3 years in terms of total accidents. The fatal accidents, there's some bounce there because it's low numbers. Again, the concerning trend is these are largely preventable. This is something that a pilot can, should be able to identify on pre-flight, or should at least have some insight. The rarity that this surprises a pilot and says, oh, I would have never caught that. If you dig back enough, it could have been as simple as, the mechanic recommended changing that fuel line because it was just looking old. And they said, well, it's not leaking fuel and I don't want to spend, right? It's not cheap, the money to fix it. Well, if it looks old on the outside, imagine what the inside looks like. And that has gummed up the system and now we don't have fuel. The big takeaway here is, starvation is leading exhaustion in terms of causes. But again, most of these are preventable.
So I saw 108 total accidents due to fuel management and 10 fatal. You mentioned starvation and exhaustion. Can you talk just a little bit about the very minute difference between those two? And it's a big difference. But
yeah, exhaustion's probably the easier one for pilots. That means there is no available fuel. So you have run out of gas. The starvation one has kind of other causes. There could be something that's blocking the fuel system or preventing the tanks from, draining in such a way, right? If you have a vent that's blocked or something, it stalls it out. So there's a number of things that cause starvation.
So Rob, anything else that stood out to you in non-commercial fixed wing trend data?
Yeah, and this is one that I think we've all harped on, especially at ASI. We've had some campaigns on this, and weather in particular is, a low kind of accident number, but comparatively what we call lethality, the percentage of fatal accidents to total accidents, it's incredibly high. And it's one thing to say, well, we only had a small number of VFR into IMC accidents, so I see 10. All of them. Every single one was a fatal accident.
Rob, I'd like to shift to a little bit of the commercial fixed wing data. We looked at that, and it's a little smaller grouping compared to the non-commercial fixed wing.
So the accident number and the rate is much lower than we see in non-commercial fixed wing. The big drivers kind of this year is that we're seeing kind of just a little spike in the fatal accident and total accident rate. Again, this one bounces more because, right, that up and down, up and down, up and down, simply because we have lower numbers. So it's more, subject to if you only have 2.5 million flight hours and you have 2 or 3 more accidents, it's really going to make a drastic change.
That makes sense, yeah. So Rob, what were the numbers then for the total number of accidents and fatals, and then give us the rate for commercial fixed wing?
So there were 59 total accidents and 12 fatal accidents. And the rate was 1.62 per 100,000 flight hours for total accidents and 0.33 for fatal accidents.
So Rob, that's 2023. It's really interesting data to take a peek at. If we look at 2024 and 2025, obviously we know the trends are continuing. We just don't have the flight hours. We don't have all the accident investigation data completed at the NTSB. But can the McSpadden Report show us some interesting trends into 24 and 25?
Certainly. I don't want people to think that the report is only good one time a year when we release it, and it's a snapshot in the past. Part of the McSpadden Report as a wider initiative is to create near real-time reporting. So we update it about every 30 days when the NTSB kind of releases their batch files of the accidents that they've completed and they're aware of. The reason when you go into 2024 and 2025 you'll see fewer graphs is just because the accident investigations aren't complete, so they just wouldn't be meaningful. They would be so empty and they would constantly move. It takes about a year and a half to kind of solidify any of those graphs. And as you said, the accident rate comes from the FAA activity survey, which right now, 2024, is still wrapping up and probably won't be released until early 2026. So if you were looking for rate information, you're still waiting until 26 for that to kind of populate. But as the year goes on, every month you can come back and you can kind of see what we've done in terms of the total number of accidents. Those graphs build up over time. So again, if you look at 2025 and you say, oh, we've had a marked decrease in accidents, well, we're still putting in 2025 accidents, and that will go up over time.
No, that's great information, Rob. And I know that you and I worked closely on what we saw in 2024, which was a reduced number compared to 23, a reduced quantity of overall accidents, reduced quantity of fatals. And I know we track the fiscal year, not the calendar year, so there's a little bit of a devil in the details. But I think we're all still pretty confident we're going to see a better number in 2024. And so far in 25, it's looking pretty good. And as long as the activity hours stay up or increasing, I think we're on a nice trend here for general aviation safety. So I have to tell you, I'm 2 years into this job and over 40 years as a GA pilot, and I am completely amazed at the rigor and the depth of analysis that goes into analyzing safety data and the safety trends and all the work Rob does with his network of folks. And it's just incredible. I've glanced at the McSpadden Report many times in the last year and a half, and I must say that maybe 3 or 4 times in my entire life did I look at it before that. It is incredibly compelling once you dig into it and look at it, and I would invite all viewers to take a look at the McSpadden Report on the ASI webpage. But this report isn't just for pilots. As Rob said, it's for policymakers, decision makers, community leaders. And Rob, I know you take this data and work very deeply with some of the network folks that you work with, and which really kind of is the engine room of general aviation safety. Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the safety numbers, the safety statistics, all of that tracking is what leads into a data-driven approach to safety. So instead of saying, oh, what are some hot topics, we really look at, well, what are the numbers telling us? What are the investigations showing us? What should we do in the future to prevent these types of accidents? And so data informs us. And part of that effort, people say, well, what does ASI do for AOPA members? And part of that is representation, right? We serve as a megaphone for our members. We take the data and our learning and the understanding of our members and what they're concerned with, and we go and we work with our industry partners. We go and we work with our government partners or other associations. And we come together as a larger group in what is a fairly large safety committee, the General Aviation Joint Safety Committee. AOPA, EAA, and the FAA all serve as chairs on that. And we help kind of steer resources into what we see as high profile kind of trends or negative trends, right? Things that are going up when we would like it to go down. We help fund new research and technology. The FAA kind of dictates their strategy and policy through that. And all of that comes from the analysis we get from accident information. That trend information tells us what we should focus on now, what we should focus on next, and what we should be funding into the future to prevent these accidents from occurring.
It's great stuff, Rob, and I got to tell you, we're happy to have you on the team. It's a tough job to analyze the data and mountains of it, and you make it look easy, and you presented it in the McSpadden Report in an easy to understand, easy to digest way. So thank you for doing that. I invite all viewers to come take a look at the McSpadden Report. The 35th Annual McSpadden Report's online. It's live now. Take a look, see what you can learn, and like and subscribe to the ASI channel. And more importantly, leave a comment down below. Let us know if you have any questions or what you think of our work for GA safety. Thanks for joining us.